I was shocked at how bad this was. This one like actually kind of boils my blood. Why are you a coward? I'm not even saying that to be like an edgelord. What am I missing? Cannot write a woman to save his life. This was just done in such an icky way. It has kept me awake at night, if you couldn't tell. Don't read this book either. Hi, I'm Sam. There's quite literally no one asking me to do this, but I would love nothing more than the opportunity to roast the ever-loving shit out of the books I did not like this year. So, hey, listen, if any of these books that I mention are ones that you adore, you love, you worship at the altar every night before bed, I love that for you. I love that journey for you. It's not the journey for me, okay? As payment for the time I spent with these books, and then at the end did not like, I now am imbuing myself with the permission to roast these books to my heart's content. So without further ado, let us begin with the roast. I first want to start out with some books that I don't want to categorize as the worst. It's more so like, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. You know, it's like that disappointed dad energy. So these are books that I had higher hopes for. They did not live up to them, but I don't think they're necessarily objectively bad books, okay? So I'm going to kind of rapid fire these because I want to get to the actual juicy delinquents of the list. Maeve Fly. It was supposed to be a female Patrick Bateman in Disneyland, plus the cover do be serving, but it came off as more silly than thrilling or horrific. YN by Esther Yi is a literary exploration of fandom culture. I was really wanting this to be like the movie Perfect Blue, and again, the cover do also be serving, but wasn't for me. Goodnight, Punpun by Inio Asano. I have really enjoyed some of his other works, and this is arguably one of his most beloved works, so I thought this was going to be a double-handed slam dunk, but it was just okay for me. Orochi by Kazuo Umezz. This is an entire series. Kazuo Umezz is like a godfather of horror manga. He has largely influenced Junji Ito, who is one of my favorite authors. So I had pretty high hopes going into this, and while some of the stories were pretty cool, the series at large wasn't total hit, and it's definitely not a series that I feel like I need to include in my collection by any means. The Nursery, this is about a woman immediately after she's given birth, and I wanted this to be like The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I thought it was going to be dealing with possible postpartum psychosis and the fallout of that, but this was just okay. The Book of Accidents, I'm just consistently disappointed by mainstream popular horror, and I'm not even saying that to be like an edgelord, like, ugh, I just have more refined tastes or something like that. That's really not it. I wish that my brain would let me enjoy it, but I just, for the most part, do not enjoy a lot of like the mainstream popular horror. This also had a lot more fantasy and fantastical elements to it that no. We Eat Our Own. I was wanting this to be like a fictionalized account of the cast of the movie Cannibal Holocaust as they were making the film and the horrors that they undoubtedly had to go through to film that movie. And while this was definitely really heavily influenced by Cannibal Holocaust, I could definitely see that in the writing. This was a lot more like political, and I just wanted to have a silly, goofy, spooky time in the Amazon rainforest. Strega. This is like a literary, maybe like baby horror. I don't think it's horror really, but it's like creepy literary. And it's about these young women who get summer work at this remote hotel, and one of the women goes missing. This was a case of definite style over substance. Pretend I'm Dead by Jen Beagin. I love me some sad girl lit. I also really loved Big Swiss, but this was just not it for me. Circe, I am a certified mythology girly, but this is marketed as a feminist retelling of the myth of Circe. I don't think this is a feminist retelling at all. Now we're getting into the juicy ones. These are the ones that I think were bad. I ranked them because, I don't know, when people make these lists and they don't rank them, I'm like, why are you a coward, you know? Anyway, number 10, so this is the least worst of the worst, is Hummingbird Salamander by Jeff Vandermeer. I had previously read Annihilation by him, loved it. That is a work of fiction that is unlike anything else I've ever read. His writing style was super singular in that, super abstract. It left me feeling amazed that someone could write like that. So I had really high hopes for this one as well. So this is about a woman who receives this mysterious package from her barista, and it's to this storage locker, and when she goes to this storage locker, she finds this taxidermy hummingbird. And that basically kicks off this series of events where she's like trying to uncover this mystery of this woman who left her this package. And there's some like family trauma that she's also going through, and like that's woven in throughout the mystery. I just didn't really understand the motivations of the main character. I didn't believe the motivations of the main character. She wasn't unhinged enough to be making these crazy choices, and she wasn't interesting enough for me to care about. Really none of the characters were interesting enough for me to care about, and I don't think you should read it. Next is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. We read this for book club, and people love this book, and Kazuo Ishiguro is a highly lauded author. But yeah, we didn't like it. We're following this narrator, and she's looking back on her life where she grew up in this special school with other kids who were put into this school. And it's very clear that these kids are different, but it's not immediately clear why they're different. It was just really disappointing. I truly don't understand why people love this book so much. It was incredibly average to me. Next is Big Fish by Danielle Wallace. I had really high hopes for this going in. I love the movie Big Fish, so I thought for sure, reading the book, I'm gonna love this. But this is one of those rare instances where the movie is way better than the book. So this is about a man who, his father is on his deathbed, and throughout his entire life, the father has always had these really crazy stories, and it's gotten to a point now where the man, as an adult, is now very disillusioned by his dad's stories, and he mostly just feels like his dad is a liar, and he feels like he's never actually had an authentic, genuine conversation with his dad. So it's kind of this man hearing about his dad's life and kind of working through that, working through his grief. It has a theme in it that I really love, which is when a child and a parent never see eye to eye, and then it's not until one of them is on their deathbed, and it's typically the parent is on their deathbed, and there's finally this moment where they actually see each other, maybe for the first time, and there's that really bittersweet feeling that it's great that they finally see each other, but it's almost this deep sorrow that it's too late because the parent or one of them is already going to be dying really soon. And it's really sad that it took one of them dying for them to finally see each other and understand each other. So I love that. I love that theme, but still, I think this was an objectively pretty boring book. Watch the movie. I literally scream cry every time I watch that movie. So yeah, don't read this book. Next is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. I read this very much on a whim. I had very few expectations for this going in. So it's not even like me unfairly putting all of this pressure on this book. This one was just like bad. This is about a family who get to an Airbnb, they're chilling, they're having a good time, they're vacationing. And then all of a sudden they get a knock on the door by this couple, and the couple is like, hey, we are the owners of this house. We're the ones that rented out this Airbnb to you. Can we come in because the world is kind of ending? And the family who are renting it are like, what is happening? They're kind of freaked out. Like, are these people just going crazy? Are they lying? Are they just trying to extort us or hurt us in some way? So it's very, psychological. You're constantly wondering like, what's actually happening? What's the truth? But I've read so many other novels that have dealt with that exact plot device so much more successfully. So I think you should skip this one too. Next is Children of Fire by Drew Karpyshyn. This is one we also read for book club. You may already know this, but I am not a fantasy girly by any means. When I first finished it, I was like, okay, I probably just didn't like that because I'm not a fantasy girly. But then when we discussed it in book club, the court has decided that this is just an objectively bad fantasy novel. So basic premise is that there are these children who are born, and they're basically like chosen ones. They're powerful in some way. And a real weakness of the story, I think, is that we're following these children from literally birth. We're getting all this detail about these characters that we don't even really know or care about yet. So it's like, why do I care? What is happening to this young girl, And then finally, whatever, they grow up, they come together, they got a big bad thing to fight and battle. There's a prophecy. Kind of all the basic fantasy book elements are at play here. But another weakness of this book is that the author cannot write a woman to save his life. And all of the romance elements that he was trying to include are super cringe, like super male gazy. The sex scenes made me want to pull off all my skin and die. And again, I thought maybe that was just a me problem because I really don't love sex scenes in my novels. So yeah, I kind of went into book club trying to be as fair as possible, but then everyone else in book club too was like, bro, those sex scenes. And I was like, I know. I just could not stand it. So yeah, don't read this book either. Next is The Devil Takes You Home by Gabino Iglesias. This was supposed to be like a spooky horror. The premise is that this guy's daughter is dying of a terminal illness, I think cancer, and he has to miss a lot of work to sit by the bedside of his literally dying daughter, and his job fires him because they're like, you've missed a lot of work. And he's like, yeah, my daughter's dying. So he becomes like a hitman, like a hired hitman to pay for his daughter's hospital bills. But then it takes like a very supernatural horror turn, but but the horror turn isn't until almost at the very end. So for most of this is just like a hitman thriller. That is not what I really signed up for. I was mostly just intrigued by how bleak the story sounded like it was going to be, and I love horror books that implement themes of grief, but this really wasn't horror to me until like the last 5%. So I don't think you should read it. Next is Helpmeet by Naven Ruthnam. This is about an old-timey couple. The husband is sick in bed and the wife is like, I do not know what is wrong with this man. And then she starts to worry that maybe his sickness is not a physical one, or maybe even one that's of this world. This is a really short novella and it was extremely forgettable. It fell super flat. It's like as soon as I closed the book, it like blipped from my mind. It was that inconsequential. So I don't think you should read this one either. Everything the Darkness Eats by Eric LaRocca was really bad. I was shocked at how bad this was. The plot was very confused. A lot of the horror scenes seemed really egregious and unnecessarily graphic. Man, I'm like even struggling to kind of like remember how to describe this plot. I just remember there's this town, a lot of the elderly folks are starting to go missing, and what really sticks in my mind is that there is a detective in the town who is investigating these happenings. And while that's happening, there's also this like side plot where there's this like extreme homophobia in the town. So he and his husband are being targeted. Their home is being vandalized. There's people breaking into their home. And then it escalates into this extreme act of violence. And again, that act of violence just seemed so unnecessarily graphic. And don't get me wrong, like I think that there is a time and place for extreme horror. There was a lot of extreme horror that made my best of list last year, but this was just done in such an icky way. It felt very gratuitous, very graphic for the sake of being graphic. I really didn't like this. And honestly, this year I had a really rough time with Eric LaRocca. And with this book, it's kind of almost come to a point where I don't know if I really need to read him anymore. And it's not that this book offended me by any means, you know, but just the way that it was written, it felt really careless to me. And I'm finding that I am disliking more of Eric LaRocca's work than I am liking it. So that's what I have to say about that. Runner up for the worst of the year is Universal Harvester by John Darnielle. This was gonna be so cool. Like in my head, this was gonna be so freaking cool. A guy works at a rental video store and he has a woman who returns a movie and she's like, hey, there's something on this tape that's not the movie. He kind of just like brushes it off, but then more customers come in and complain of a similar happening. So I was like, okay, cool. This is gonna be kind of like Ring vibes where there's like this haunted videotape or like maybe some sort of snuff film, like there's a serial killer in the town and he's recording his killings and taping them over on these videos and distributing them. But it was not satisfying. There was again this sort of like confusing infusion of the character's family trauma, but it wasn't fleshed out enough. It wasn't well developed enough. So it didn't feel like it made sense to include it and weave it into the story. So I also think John Darnielle is another author where I don't really need to read any more of him. Okay, the worst book I read this year. This one like actually kind of boils my blood. It makes me mad. I don't understand. Some wires got crossed when someone was like building my matrix for me because I just like do not understand how this book is so highly rated on Goodreads. Like, is it bots? Are bots rating this book so highly? I don't get it. This book was not good. That is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This has, again, an overwhelmingly high rating on Goodreads. And I've even like expressed it to friends who have similar reading tastes to me. Like, this book was so bad. Like, I need you to hate read it and then like commiserate with me. And then they read it and they love it. And I'm like, what is happening? What is happening? Like, I truly don't understand. If you are a fan of this book and you're watching this, like, I'm not even trying to be a bitch about this. Please comment below. Like, what am I missing? What am I missing? Because I really feel like I'm going crazy. Okay, so this book is about this retirement age woman. She works part-time as a janitor at this aquarium. And her son went missing. It's like assumed that he passed away when he was like in high school. So we're kind of following this lonely-ish old woman, but she takes a lot of comfort in her work and she takes a lot of pride in her work. And another really big positive aspect of her job for her is interacting with this octopus named Marcellus. And I think a strength of this book is that we do get the point of view of the octopus, but it's very brief. And then we're also getting the point of view of this guy who's like a deadbeat. He kind of has like no direction in life. And his path crosses with this older woman's path. And I don't know, I kind of get what this book was trying to do, like exploring the loneliness of old age, how how people who live alone and go throughout life alone maybe aren't as lonely as we think they are or as we project onto them. Unexpected friendships. I get it. I get the themes, like how they could be interesting to a person, but I think the dialogue and the ways that the characters were constructed were actually extremely bad. They felt so amateur to me. It felt like I was reading a classmate's high school creative writing assignment. I'm floored. I'm really just like at a loss. I don't understand how, even if you could read that and you're like, I really like the octopus, I really like the themes that this book is trying to explore, I just don't think that any of that can outshine the drawbacks of this book to the point that someone would give it 5 stars. But not only that, that hundreds of thousands of people would give it 5 stars. Okay? I feel like I'm becoming like Charlie in that episode of It's Always Sunny, where I'm like, there's gotta be something we're missing here. Like there's some conspiracy at play here because this book was so bad. Okay. Again, I'm really sorry if you love this book. I don't mean it in a mean way, but I just like am truly flabbergasted. I love that you loved it. I love that you found joy in this book, but it has kept me awake at night, if you couldn't tell. Okay, so those were my most disappointing and worst reads of 2023. I actually think that this year was a little bit better than the year before. I'm focusing more on books that I know will bring me joy, but I am proud of myself for still reading books outside of my normal wheelhouse and outside of my normal comfort zone, because sometimes those are my favorite reads, ones that I am sure I'll hate or ones that I have zero expectations for, and then I end up loving them. So you can like this video if you want, comment, subscribe if you want. I would love to have you if I haven't already extremely offended you by roasting the shit out of a book that you love and cherish deeply. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.